Namibia Ports Authority, NamPort, is at the center of a slew of allegations by the leader of the Independent Patriots for Change, IPC, Dr. Panduleni Itula, who claims that the handling of the Lüderitz oil supply base design, build, own, operate and transfer tender, DBOOT, was cancelled without explanation, and that the president's sons operate at the port without competitive tender. Now, joining us now is the Chief Executive Officer of NamPort, Mr. Andrew Kanime. Mr. Kanime, a very good evening to you, sir, and thank you for joining us.
A very good evening to you too, and thank you for inviting me.
Now, Mr. Kanime, perhaps just paint the picture for us and explain what exactly is this Lüderitz oil supply base design, build, own, operate and transfer tender. What is this?
Well, maybe just to provide the context, as you might be aware, following the discovery of commercial oil offshore Namibia's west coast on the Orange Basin, the international oil companies are currently obviously busy with the exploration and appraisal activities with a view to making a final decision with respect to whether commercial production should actually proceed. Now, the reality on the ground is that for us to be able to accommodate the additional activities or to support the offshore oil and gas activities, we need to expand our port infrastructure, because the current port infrastructure is not sufficient to cater for the additional business activities or the support that will be required with the oil and gas activities. And therefore, as part of ensuring that we have sufficient capacity to cater for the industry, we are planning a project that we are actually going to implement in partnership with the private sector. And that is what we call the DBOOT tender, because we would be partnering with the private sector basically to design, build, own, operate, and ultimately transfer that particular facility to NamPort. So it's really an arrangement between ourselves and the private sector for somebody to come and deploy private capital to then invest in this new additional port facility that would then be required to actually support the activities for the oil fields.
Now, IPC leader Dr. Itula alleges that the tender was cancelled without explanation. Perhaps share with us what was the reason behind the cancellation, and was this publicized and was it made known?
Well, for the Port of Lüderitz, we are actually currently planning 2 port expansion projects. The first one is the one that I just alluded to cater for the additional requirements for the oil and gas activities. But at the moment, our Port of Lüderitz is also operating at full capacity already. And we also need to provide for additional capacity to cater and service the existing industries. And for these 2 projects, now the project specifically that is catering for existing industries is adjacent Shark Island. And this is a very sensitive area, really, given the sad history around Shark Island. Now, at the time when we advertised the tender for the development of the oil and gas facility, there was already an environmental impact assessment study underway for the expansion of the existing port. When we advertised, obviously, now this tender for the development of the oil and gas facility, there was confusion amongst the public and stakeholders, who obviously then thought that we were actually proceeding to develop or to expand the port without obtaining the necessary or completing the environmental impact assessment study. Now, because of this confusion around these two projects, although they are distinctly separate, we deemed it fit at the time to cancel this particular tender with a view to clearing the misconceptions and the confusion around these two tenders. So that was really the reason why we decided to cancel the tender at the time, was to ensure that there's no confusion around the environmental impact assessment study that pertains to this particular to these two projects, and also to assure the relevant stakeholders that we were not going to proceed with the development of the project without obtaining the necessary approvals from the institutions, specifically the Environmental Commissioner and the National Heritage Council. Now, obviously, the environmental impact assessment study that was underway at the time pertains, as I said, to existing a port expansion project, but with the advertisement of the project that pertains to the oil and gas, we really needed just to clear out that confusion, and that's the reason why we canceled the tender at the time.
Now, there are allegations that the Namibia Industrial Development Agency was brought on board by NamPort to circumvent the Port Authority's own procurement processes. Is NIDA now your procurement agent?
Absolutely not. NIDA is definitely not a procurement agent for NamPort. NamPort remains the only statutory body that has got the legal mandate to develop and manage ports. The same piece of legislation gives us the right to partner with either the private sector or the public sector to develop the required infrastructure. Now, given that NIDA is responsible for driving the industrialization agenda for Namibia, we deemed it fit that NamPort, together with NIDA, come together to form a formidable partnership for us to ensure that we maximize the benefits that can potentially be derived out of the implementation of this oil and gas supply base. So they're not coming to circumvent the procurement process for NamPort. We are joining forces as state-owned enterprises. We can, and in fact, there is provision in the law for two state institutions to join hands together to develop this particular project. And again, just to indicate that together, NamPort and NIDA will proceed to source a development partner that is actually going to work with us to develop the oil and gas supply base in Lüderitz.
Now, Mr. Kanime, talk to us about Tradeport. That's one of the companies named as being owned by one of the president's sons and its relationship with NamPort.
Well, yes, we are indeed aware of the business at Tradeport. The reality is that NamPort does have a relationship with Tradeport. Tradeport is a logistics service provider that is operating out of the port of Lüderitz. And in terms of the lease agreement that we have got with Tradeport, they are responsible for handling the manganese business that is actually imported from the Northern Cape of South Africa for re-export. So the relationship between NamPort and Tradeport pertains to the manganese business that is imported from South Africa for re-export via the port of Lüderitz. That's really the relationship that exists between NamPort and Lüderitz. It exclusively deals with the import of or the handling of manganese business.
But the allegations are that Tradeport is involved with upstream oil and gas activities at the Lüderitz port with your full knowledge.
Unfortunately, that is not the case. As I indicated earlier, the relationship between NamPort and Tradeport pertains only to the handling of manganese. To our knowledge, And in terms of the activities that Tradeport carries out of the port of Lüderitz, they're not involved in the oil and gas supply business. It is manganese that they are handling and nothing else, as far as specifically the port of Lüderitz is concerned. And again, the lease agreement that exists between ourselves and them only permits them to handle the manganese business.
All right.